how do we navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and the continuously evolving technology trends in a world that never sleeps? Well, today here on Tech Talks Daily, I'm privileged to welcome back to the show Steve Orrin, Federal CTO at Intel. And he's going to be shedding light on some of the most pressing questions that you might have been thinking of recently. And our journey today will take us deep into the heart of zero trust architecture, the transformative power of AI across every sector, and by that I also mean the public sector, including government, and the pivotal strategies that can drive successful innovation. And as we peer into the horizon of emerging technologies, such as that concept of an AI PC, and bringing that to life, and bringing AI acceleration to the edge, I also want to explore Intel's strategic focus on scaling AI and security to meet the demands of these increasingly diverse environments. So today, I invite you to join me as I unravel the complexities of these topics, guided by Steve's insights, and also talk about surrounding oneself with a team of smart individuals and that relentless pursuit of knowledge to stay ahead in the technology curve. So the only question I have left for you is, are you ready to embark on this enlightening journey and discover how these innovations are not just shaping our digital landscape, but revolutionising the way we address security, efficiency, and indeed technological advancement? Hopefully you said yes. Before we get today's guest on though, I need to give a quick shout out and a thank you to the sponsors of Tech Talks Daily this month. They are Kiteworks. And in a digital age where the landscape of remote work is ever expanding, the security and efficiency of your managed file transfer solution are paramount. This is where Kiteworks sets a new benchmark, far surpassing legacy MFT tools with its unparalleled security measures and user-centric design. They've even been awarded the prestigious FedRAMP Moderate Authorization, a recognition that is not easily obtained, and they've held it since 2017 by the Department of Defense. So what I'm trying to say here is, don't let outdated technology dictate the safety and efficiency of your business operations. And you can start your journey towards uncompromised security and unparalleled functionality today by visiting kiteworks.com. That's kiteworks.com. But now it's time to get on with the show and invite today's guest on. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way stateside, where Steve is going to join us once again to share his insights. So a massive warm welcome back to the show. We last spoke 18 months ago. I don't know what happened there or how that happened, but can you just remind the listeners that maybe missed our first conversation with just a little about who you are and what you do?
Well, thank you, Neil, and it's great to be back here. I'm Steve Orrin. I'm the Federal CTO for Intel Corporation, and in that role, I help the federal government and the public sector adopt technology and innovations to help their mission and enterprise needs, and also help Intel to best understand the requirements and the use cases that the government has.
And speaking of use cases, one of the huge topics right now is zero trust architecture. There's a few myths and misconceptions around it. Some people think that it is way too complicated. Others think it's just something you cannot not have in the current climate. So just to set the scene for our conversation today, could you just walk me through the initial steps organizations should maybe think about taking right at the beginning of their journey towards a zero trust architecture? And also, how does Intel approach that transition? Because it is one of those areas that people might not associate with Intel too.
Well, that's a really good question. And there's a lot of confusion today around what does it mean to do zero trust. And I think the starting point is understanding that it's not an end game. It's not a product or a technology you deploy and magically you have zero trust. It is, in fact, a journey. And it's an ongoing journey as we evolve and mature our security controls and our enterprise and capabilities to have a zero trust approach to the way we do things. And so the first step is to know that there are many paths to get on that journey. And it starts with understanding your infrastructure. So step one is having a plan, understanding what you need to do, what your zero trust journey is going to look like. And to get that ball rolling, there are a couple of key recommendations that I often give to CIOs and CISOs of sort of where to begin. One of the first steps is asset inventory and understanding both the assets that you're managing and deploying and the resources or services that you're providing, whether it be internally to your internal customers and employees or services out to your business partners, understanding what those key assets and resources are, because you can't secure what you don't know. And at its core, this is not a daunting task. Most organizations have this data today. They may be distributed across multiple databases and multiple different business units, but your finance department knows what you spent money on. They're capitalizing all your hardware. Your finance department knows what cloud services you're taking advantage of. Your business units and your operational environments know what services they're providing. And so this information exists. It's about gathering it together in order to be able to do that assessment, that inventory, to know what you need to protect, what transactions need to be protected and authorized, what devices and data sets and things that you have to control. And so step one is just getting that asset inventory and understanding what you have and what the risk of those things are. From there, a lot of organizations quickly move to multi-factor authentication, and that is a key part of the story. You need to be able to do multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication to be able to authenticate both the user and that user at that moment in time to achieve those zero trust tenets of continuous authorization, default deny, and continuous monitoring. But that's not where you stop. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of organizations make is they get their multi-factor rolled out and they say, mission accomplished, we're done. And multi-factor is one key aspect, but there's a lot of other things that go along for the ride in order to be able to achieve zero trust. And many organizations have already started deploying two-factor or multi-factor authentication. So the question is, what do I do next? And there it's really looking at the data and understanding how do you protect the data throughout its life cycle, at rest on systems, in transit between systems and end users, and while it's being operated upon and in use, and being able to put together a plan and a strategy for protecting data through all of its stages, from creation all the way through deletion. Another key area that seems awfully daunting is the continuous monitoring. That's a scary one, but it's not as scary as people often think. The key is to be able to to change the way you approach your auditing, your monitoring, your logging, and your event correlation from a moment in time or a point. So whether it's, every 6 months we audit our systems, or in the development process, we do some audits, and then at deployment, we do some audits. And then, like I said, every 6 months, to changing that dynamic to an ongoing continuous monitoring. And one of the key tenets of zero trust is this notion of a dynamic approach to risk. When I'm transacting with a system, I need to be able to transact with that system, but I'm doing it at a moment in time from a given system on a given network with a given authority. And being able to assess that at this moment in time and apply the appropriate authorizations based on the risk environment I'm currently at, as opposed to a decision that was made 6 months ago or 10 months ago when I first got access to that system. It's changing that capability to be able to make that determination at the time of transaction. And that is one of the key things that will help evolve the zero trust journey for organizations, is switching from that point in time, and then, sort of every regular cadence of audits and monitoring to an ongoing continuous, and applying that risk calculus at the time of transaction. And so those are some of the key building blocks. There's a lot of guidance out there about where to begin and how to structure your plans. And I think the last advice before I talk about what Intel does is get out of the analysis phase and into the implementation phase. And we've seen a great example of the U.S. government and the Department of Defense. The first executive order said you must have a plan. And then the next piece of that was you must have a date to start implementing. And then the next piece of that is start implementing with a goal of getting a certain level of maturity by a given date. And so they've actually pushed to get out of the analysis phase, because a lot of these kind of revolutionary or evolutionary approaches to security, you can spend 2 to 3 years sort of analyzing the problem and creating the perfect risk scores. And that's not the goal of zero trust. The goal of zero trust is to get that ball moving, to increase your security, increase your risk mitigations. And the only way to do that is to actually start applying it to real world systems and getting it out into your environment. Now, Intel, as everyone knows, is a chip manufacturer. We also produce a lot of software, a lot of systems. Our hardware and software exist all across the environment, from clients to network boxes to the cloud to edge systems. And one of the ways that we're helping is we're providing key security capabilities and controls into our hardware, exposed through our software and ecosystem, that organizations can take advantage of as they start their zero trust journey. And some of them are the obvious things like encryption acceleration or confidential computing for data confidentiality for while it's in use. And some of them are less obvious, like accelerating the security controls that you need to do. One of the key benefits we've seen has not been in the security realm at all. It's in the data movement and IO side of the camp. But when you're doing continuous monitoring and you're having to process, terabytes of data to be able to do that continuous monitoring event, having the right architecture that can move that data at speed to not be a bottleneck actually improves your security posture. And so Intel is providing these key ingredients and these key capabilities and services that then organizations can adopt as part of their zero trust journey. And so one way, if you look at the NIST SP 800-207, which is the zero trust architecture guidance, one of the things they show is all the different kinds of ways that the controls then are implemented by the policy orchestrator and the policy administrator. All of those capabilities that you have from all of your security ecosystem providers, from your platform providers and hardware providers are basically controls that can be implemented in a zero trust way. And that's where Intel's strategy has been, is taking our security capabilities and allowing organizations to implement them with, tenets like default deny, continuous authorization, attestation, so they can build them into their zero trust architecture.
And when we last spoke in September 2022, the world was a very, very different place. We were blissfully unaware that the world was about to go crazy for Gen AI, and that AI, although it had been around for many, many years, was about to enter the mainstream, and businesses in just about every industry were trying to find their place in the AI narrative. And fast forward to 2024 with AI's integration into various sectors. The battleground of AI threats, though, and risks are ever expanding. So a question I've got to ask from a security background here is, what are the most pressing AI threats that you see today, and how are you at Intel working to mitigate some of these risks?
So, Neil, you hit it on the head. The AI craze has happened, and whether it be large language models and generative AI or just the scaling of the classic deep learning algorithms into every aspect of our lives. With every revolution comes really understanding that there are risks and threats, and AI is no different. Every day we see new articles and new publications of threats and attacks. I think the way to look at it is that you look at the sort of the AI lifecycle and understand there's what's hot right now, which is AI prompt injection and manipulation. So these targeted attacks at large language models. Fuzzing them and attacking them to be able to get either expose IP about what the AI was trained on, or getting them to provide false answers or forget information they've learned with a hallucination, and catastrophic forgetting, which I think is one of the best terms we've come up with as an industry, is catastrophic forgetting. But those kind of targeted attacks at the front end of AI is where everyone is focused on, and those are serious attacks. But also, I think the things that are often overlooked is corruption and biases and poisoning that can happen to the data sets that those AIs are trained on, or especially in the case of large language models, they're always learning. So every query is an opportunity for that AI to learn. And so putting in corrupted learning injections or queries, being able to do poisoning attacks that can poison the data and poison the algorithm, are also of key concern. And lastly is, how do I protect that model once it's deployed? So when you think about a lot of the applications of AI, whether it be an autonomous vehicle or a edge sensor, in that device, there's a set of algorithms that have been deployed to, whether it be in the car, avoid the tree, or be able to recognize the tree versus the shadow so that you don't run into it, in a camera being able to detect if someone's trying to break into your house, or any of those kind of use cases. How do I protect that model from an adversary that wants to either corrupt it or spoof it or give it false information? And so when we look at sort of how do we protect AI, we have to think about it from all aspects of the AI lifecycle. But just to hit to that key point, I think right now the hot area of research, and there have been papers published. There was a whole section of the DEF CON conference this past summer dedicated to attacking AI. A lot of that focuses on this, what we call the injection attacks, and the query poisoning. How Intel is working with the industry and the ecosystem to help mitigate these risks, it comes down to providing the hardware security and software security capabilities to protect the whole life cycle. So it's when you're running your AI, you'll be able to do secure AI or confidential AI by protecting the model and the inference it's doing, whether that's deployed in the cloud or at the edge, and using confidential computing is one of the key mechanisms that organizations and cloud providers are doing to protect that last stage of the AI process, to even earlier stages by being able to do attestation of the system, make sure I have a clean environment when I'm performing the labeling and the tuning and the model development and training, and giving you that life cycle approach so that I can get a visibility from an enterprise perspective of the security and the trust in the AI systems. And that's ultimately a question that we're seeing asked at the strategic level in organizations and by governments. Sometimes it's called ethical AI, but really at its core is, how do I trust this AI? How do I make sure it's going to do the right things? How do I make sure this AI is going to be used in the right way? And building the underlying infrastructure that can provide both the security, confidentiality, and integrity for that AI and those AI tools, but also being able to attest what went into the box. What were the data sets? Where was this algorithm tuned? What tools that were used? And so that more holistic approach is what's going to be needed. And, at Intel, we're providing those key foundational building blocks to help organizations build more trustworthy AIs.
And when we've been scrolling down our news feeds over the last 18 months, when we're hearing about AI, it's all about the private sector and how they're leveraging AI and new software, new tools, etc. But I think very often we miss the fact that AI's impact on the public sector is equally as profound, if not more so. So can you shine a light on this, maybe share a few examples of how AI is revolutionizing enterprise operations within government and public sector environments? Because there's a bit of a stereotype that this area is slow to adopt to the pace of change. They haven't got the same financial backing, etc. But that is changing, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we're seeing AI permeate all aspects of the public sector. One thing to keep in mind is the public sector is actually not different from the private sector in many ways. If you look at the broader government, the largest healthcare provider is the Veterans Administration, a government organization. One of the largest financial institutions is the IRS and the Medicare systems that are processing payments for healthcare. And so when you look at it, they have a lot of the same challenges, the same applications or same capabilities that you find in the private sector. Logistics, a UPS or FedEx knows how to get your package there on time. The defense logistics has to get jeeps and supplies to wherever the army or the military needs it. So they're dealing with a lot of the same problems. And so the innovations we're seeing AI have an impact on in the private sector are absolutely being leveraged in the public sector, just often not as publicly exposed or publicly talked about. But we've seen, things being applied, whether it be object tracking and object recognition, a lot of the facial recognition or not facial, but, human detection, person detection, object detection, and tracking use cases across the government. One example that forestry did a while ago was being able to detect blight in the national forests using an AI model, and being able to put that onto a set of drones that can fly through the forest at a much better efficiency than sending a lone forestry ranger to walk the path. And so they were able to get really good information about the state of, in this case, blight or disease on the trees, and in many cases be able to catch it early enough to be able to mitigate it or be able to recognize where it's been affecting so they can apply their resources more appropriately. So we're seeing a lot of examples. I think the other thing that people forget, everyone looks at the sort of the cool mission side of, whether it's the military with all the things that they do or other citizen services. But on the back end, the public sector is very much like the private sector. You have HR, you have finance, you have capital budgets, you have ERP applications, you have a lot of document and compliance and processes that all could benefit from large language models and the application of AI. And we're seeing innovations and deployments of these capabilities into what I call the non-sexy part of the business, which is automating manual processes, improving the user experience on enterprise resource planning applications, providing analytic tools to make better decisions to reduce redundancy and find cost efficiencies. And so those things are actually having some of the bigger impacts. One example was being able to take a manual document-based process that used to take about 6 months of manual human people to go through and read documents and make sure they were in the right format and apply them to the right data sets, and be able to automate that down to something like 18 minutes. And so that transformation had a significant impact to the bottom line of reduction in time to getting that process done, but also saving time and energy on errors by having an automated tool be able to speed up that process. And so we're seeing across the public sector in all aspects, both the mission side as well as the back-end enterprise, AI is being transformative.
And I think it was Mark Twain that once said that history never repeats itself, but it does often rhyme. And this is not the first time that we've seen tech disrupting businesses and indeed traditional business models. And I suspect that you've learned a thing or two from these cycles throughout your career too. So with your extensive background in tech, leadership and innovation, what strategies do you think are or will be crucial for driving successful product development and market introduction in today's tech landscape? Because it can feel daunting, challenging and overwhelming for business leaders, but the reality is we've been here before, haven't we?
Absolutely. And Neil, to that same Mark Twain quote, it's not that we have to do something different. Yeah. It's applying the right processes. And to use a quote from one of my favorite books, Good to Great, is get the right people on the bus. Yeah. Surround yourself with a diverse team that understands the business applications, the systems and infrastructure that's getting deployed on, represents the customer, represents the compliance framework, and get them all together as we start to adopt or look at these technology innovations. From a product development perspective, is if you understand the customer use case, whether that customer is external or internal, and give them the ability to drive your requirements, it will make your the successful deployment that much easier because you'll already have anticipated many of the concerns or many of the needs of the very constituency that you're trying to address. Additionally, planning for what is that environment you're going to have to live in. So a lot of development happens, in a lab or in a small set of capabilities. Understanding what is needed for the scale, what is needing to secure that capability at scale when you get outside the four walls of the research and development team. Those are some of the key recommendations, and they're nothing new. I mean, this is something that we've been doing for years about how do you best adopt innovative technology into existing environments, is bring the right people in the room early in the process and understand the deployment requirements at the beginning, as opposed to let's build a really cool widget and then figure out how do we force it downstream. And the last thing is the flip side is that a lot of times business leaders want to analyze everything to death. They want to understand what's the impact of this innovation. And one of my key recommendations is find an application that is a good target and actually go implement. And along the same lines, don't take the most important application to your business. Don't crater your business if something goes wrong. But also at the same time, don't take an application or environment that is meaningless. It needs to be like I call that Goldilocks zone, something that is impactful but not mission critical for that first innovation. So that if it does have a problem or it fails or there's issues, it doesn't hurt the business or take things offline that are critical to your operations. At the same time, if you are successful, it actually has meaning to the organization. They can see how to scale it. And so you need to find that sort of sweet spot of where to apply these innovative technologies and developments.
And before we started recording the podcast today, we were both geeking out a little bit on the concept of AI computing, the speed of new processors and chips, etc. So looking ahead, especially around after some of the trends that we're seeing at the moment, are there any other emerging technologies that you see playing a pivotal role in federal IT solutions? And is there anything you can share around how Intel is preparing to meet these future demands? Because the speed of change is just phenomenal at the minute. There's a lot of exciting things happening.
Absolutely. And I think one of the key things, and this came out a few months ago, is we're seeing, as AI is really becoming pervasive, a new concept in the technology space is the AI PC. And it's really about extending AI all the way to where clients and users are operating. And, as we were talking about the application of AI note takers and AI summary tools in this environments where you're doing your work, Teams, Zoom, what have you, it's just one example of where AI is, at the very edge where we're operating. We're using AI all the time. And so the idea of having an AI PC, a PC that has built-in acceleration for AI, so that I can operate on AI at the edge and not be completely reliant on the cloud. And the cloud plays a key role as well, but understanding that it's an end-to-end story. And so we're seeing AI really become the foundation for a lot of the way that businesses and transactions are transforming. And I think one of the really cool innovations of the last year is this idea of having native acceleration and native AI capabilities all the way out at the client PC.
Wow, incredibly exciting stuff there. And I've got to ask, on behalf of any technology strategists, especially in the public sector that might be listening to our conversation today, any advice that you would offer to them to maybe effectively leverage AI and cybersecurity solutions to better enhance their operations and security posture? Because there's a lot of good stuff coming along, but there's also a fair amount of protection that needs to be put in place to protect that good stuff, right?
Absolutely. And from a strategic perspective, the key is to make sure to build in those plans and requirements from the get-go. So as you're looking to deploy, whether it be AI or other innovative technologies, understanding both your requirements, but also what are the tools you need to deploy with those technologies to properly secure them to meet your risk posture, your risk needs, and how do you deploy them at scale? And I think, from a strategic perspective, it's looking holistically across the organization. At the tactical level, of people looking, well, how do I protect my application? How do I protect the ins and outs of the data into my application? But at an enterprise level or strategic level, it's understanding what is that full life cycle? Follow the bit. Where does the data flow? And so it's really thinking strategically on these tactical implementations. And how do I build the right infrastructure? How do I get the right resources to deploy AI at scale? And so when we look strategically across organizations, it's understanding how do you transition out of the research, out of the development phase, and transition it into scale, and building the right infrastructures to meet the security posture of the organization is really going to be the challenge for technology strategists, to think more holistically and to pull from different domains in order to achieve your mission and enterprise goals.
And as I said at the very beginning of our conversation today, when we first spoke back in September 22, neither of us could have predicted the scale of the AI explosion. But now, of course, that genie is out of the bottle. It ain't going back in. So what's your vision for the future of Intel's initiatives in the federal space, particularly regarding cybersecurity and AI? And how do you see these technologies evolving to address both government and national security needs, which, again, is a huge topic right now, especially, I think I was reading before we started the conversation that 4 billion people across the planet will be going to the polls this year. And technology is playing a big part in this, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And Neil, at its core is how are we going to help the federal government scale their operations with AI and cybersecurity and really be able to protect against the kinds of threats and adversaries we're dealing with. And at its core, I think the key is that word scale. It's, when we think about 4 billion people going to the polls or the millions of people that are leveraging technology in their everyday lives, at its core is how do you do these things at the scale necessary to service those large constituencies? And so I think that's where a lot of Intel's initiatives are around being able to do it at scale, but also to do it at scale in a low cost or at least a TCO improved environment. And whether that be things like, sort of doing better at data ingestion and data processing, be able to move the data more efficiently, be able to deal with the scale computing, the hyperscalers, all the way down to the edge. And at its core, that's where Intel is providing innovations up and down the stack from, like we talked about briefly a moment ago, the AI PC, to building capabilities into the network infrastructure with new architectures for improving the way that data flows across the edge and cloud networks with our infrastructure processing units that pushes a lot of that compute right up to the network edge, all the way to how the hyperscalers are deploying quicker the capabilities to scale these applications, and things like large language models that are huge and massive, trillions of parameters, need or consume data, and they need the processing in order to be able to do it. And so where Intel's vision and the initiatives around the future is providing the right technology to scale your compute at the right place, and understanding that it is a heterogeneous computing architecture that will the best benefit the enterprise and the global economy. understanding you need a particular kind of computing at the edge, a particular kind of computing in the network, and a different kind of computing in the cloud, and having the right compute for the right workload. And that's really at the core of Intel's vision of why we have CPUs and accelerators across the spectrum from low power to hyperscaler. And then looking out towards the future, it's then looking at what custom capabilities are necessary to increase that scale, increase that performance, or increase that capability, whether it be around security or data flow or AI. And, as Intel announced with our IDM 2.0 strategy, the Intel Foundry is the opportunity for customers and partners to come in and do custom hardware to meet their specific application needs when you start talking about those large scale environments. And so being able to not just take a general sort of off the shelf, but when you need it, having the ability to customize to meet your mission or meet your enterprise needs.
And I'm conscious there's a couple of technologies we are fascinated and passionate about the future and where we're heading. But if we look back for a moment, none of us are able to achieve any degree of success without a little help along the way. So to finish the podcast today, I'd love to find out more if there was a particular person that you might be grateful towards, helped you get you where you are in your career, or maybe just saw something in you back in the day and invested a little time into you. Who would that person be and why? It'd be great to give them a little shout out today.
Sure. So when I was starting off in my career in doing cybersecurity startups, I reached out to Bruce Schneier to get some advice on an algorithm that we were implementing. And he really took me under his wing and was an absolute great mentor to help me understand not just, how do we need to fix our algorithm in that particular product, but understanding the cryptography and security ecosystem at that time. And was an absolute key mentor for both my first company and my second company when we were doing startups in the 90s around data encryption on the edge, on the client, as well as looking at enterprise systems and security for mainframe systems. So I'd like to get a shout out to Bruce Schneier. For those who haven't read, he's got a variety of books. He puts out regular newsletters, but he was an absolute crucial person in my career to help me better understand the environment, better understand the techniques and the technologies that were being used at the time, and really just took me under his wing and helped guide me to understand some of the nuance of the proper ways of implementing cryptography, the proper ways to implement public key and asymmetric techniques in order to protect data and protect users. Absolutely love that. A quick shout out to Bruce. And finally, looking forward, of course, you're right in the eye of the storm of all this cutting-edge technology, emerging technologies. I've got to ask, on behalf of everybody else listening around the world, how or where do you self-educate? How do you keep up to speed with all this? Well, it is a fire hose. There are some key things I look at to help me keep abreast of what's going on. One of the best news feeds that I like it's called the Hacker News. And what I really like about it, it's produced out of India. And what's really cool about that is that oftentimes the news articles that they see, just because they're so much further ahead in the time zones, I will get their feed in the morning and be 3 or 4 hours ahead of the U.S. News rags as far as what are the new attacks, what are the new vulnerabilities, what are the new research. And so from a security perspective, I love the Hacker News. Like I said, because it just gives me early insights into what's going to happen. And then from there, it's finding the key people who are publishing information and putting things out and getting those feeds. So people like Robert Hansen has a podcast as well as puts out regular articles that are just fascinating to read. So finding what we call those key bell cows, who are the ones that are putting out really good content, and make sure that you're on their feeds. Listening to podcasts like yours, Niels, and listening from people in the industry is really how we keep up to speed with just the sheer volume of things that are going on. And then, read. I've got a stack of books behind me here. And so I'm always looking for the next book on whether it be AI or technology. And then lastly, it goes back to that quote from Jim Collins' Good to Great. Surround yourself with people smarter than you and listen to them. And I have architects on my team with domains of experience and skills that I don't have. And so I am leveraging their smart brains in order to keep abreast of everything from AI to networking protocols and what's going to be happening in the next several months in those domains. Wow, absolutely incredible. So much food for thought in our conversation today. And for anyone listening, wanting to just dig a little bit deeper on anything we talked about, obviously Intel is a huge website. Anywhere in particular you'd like to point people? So if you go to intel.com/public sector, you'll see all the content that we're putting out focused on the U.S. government. And from there, you can obviously link on to the broader Intel and the capabilities we're doing around confidential computing and AI can all be linked off that page. And if you want to follow my feed, I'm SORRIN on LinkedIn. So Soren off of LinkedIn is where you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure links are there for both of those places. And so much I loved about our conversation today because we covered everything from the new background of AI threats and risks, starting your journey towards a zero trust architecture and how AI is transforming the public sector enterprise. And I think it's so important to shine a light on that. But it's not all about AI and technology or AI PCs and all that shiny stuff that we get excited about. It's also about getting the right people on the bus, getting those diverse voices and the role of humans in collaborating with technology. That's where the magic happens. But thank you so much for a timely reminder of that and sharing your insights today.
Oh, thank you, Neil. It was a pleasure to come back and be with you on the podcast today.
One of the standout lines from Steve in our conversation today for me was, it's about getting the right people on the bus. It's about surrounding yourself with a diverse team that understands the business applications, the systems, the infrastructure that it's getting deployed on, that represents the customer, represents the compliance member, and get them all together so we can start to adopt or look at these technology innovations. I think that answer there encapsulates everything that I love about Steve and our conversation today. But as we draw our conversation to a close, I think it's clear that the path of mastering AI, cybersecurity, and the latest technology trends is intricate and thrilling. But as we all embark on this zero trust journey, harness the power of AI in government and steer through that sea of emerging technologies, it does require a keen understanding of our needs, a strategic approach to innovation, and an unyielding commitment to learning and adaptation. So I cannot thank Steve enough for sharing his wisdom today, the value of collaboration, diversity and expertise in navigating the complexities of today's tech environment. It's not all about the technology. It's people right at the heart of this. But what strategies will you be adopting to stay ahead in the ever-evolving tech landscape? How will you build your team of experts to navigate these challenges? As always, share your thoughts with me. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilC.Hughes. And remember, the journey of innovation is continuous. It's a journey, not a destination. And it's filled with learning, adaptation, and collaboration. So let's keep this conversation going. Join me again tomorrow. We'll do it all again with a different guest and a different topic. But thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.